Mercedes came into this season as the clear favorites, fastest in Barcelona, most laps in Bahrain. Toto Wolff walking around the paddock like he already owns the championship. But here's what nobody is telling you. By the time they load the cars onto the plane to Melbourne, Mercedes could be in deeper trouble than at any point in the last 3 years. And it's not just one problem, it's 3, stacked on top of each other. Let's break it all down. Let's start with the story that blew up in the final days of Bahrain testing, because this one is genuinely wild. In 2026, Formula One switched to 100% sustainable fuel. Sounds simple, right? It is anything but. The FIA hasn't just changed what fuel teams burn, they've changed the entire certification process. Previously, your fuel lab sent a sample to a British testing facility. You got a green light in 2 or 3 weeks, job done. This year, a company called Zemo Partnership has to verify not just the finished fuel blend, but the entire production chain, where every single component comes from, how it's made, the sustainability of every step in the process. That takes months, not weeks. Now here's where it gets interesting. Going into Australia, Shell, who supply Ferrari, were confirmed homologated. ExxonMobil, who supply Red Bull, confirmed. BP, who supply Audi, confirmed. Petronas, who supply Mercedes, McLaren, Williams, and Alpine, still waiting. That is 4 of the top teams in Formula One potentially heading to the first race of the season without fully certified fuel. And if Petronas misses that deadline, those teams would be forced to run what's called a provisional fuel blend, one cobbled together only from previously approved components. Not the fuel their engine was built around, not the fuel they spent hundreds of millions developing. A fallback, a compromise. And now listen to this. I've been told Mercedes may run with the engine map that their customer teams used in Bahrain, specifically to avoid stressing the engine. That's not sandbagging, that's damage control. And Toto Wolff knew people were talking. He erupted in the Bahrain paddock, and I quote, "We were told our compression ratio was illegal. Total bullshit, utter bullshit." Now the next story is our fuel is illegal? Maybe tomorrow I've been on the Epstein files. Who knows what? Now look, Toto is one of the sharpest operators in the paddock, but when someone gets that aggressive in their denial, you pay attention. Because what he was actually confirming, even while deflecting, is that the fuel situation is real. The question is just how serious. Here's what I believe happened. In Barcelona, Mercedes were running last year's fuel, or a version of it. Their engine was flawless. 500 laps, barely a single issue. Then they came to Bahrain. They introduced the new Petronas EF Sustainable Blend into a maxed-out, brand-new power unit, and things started going wrong. Coincidence? I don't think so. Now let's talk about what actually happened on track in Bahrain, because the headline numbers hide the horror show underneath. Yes, Mercedes completed the most laps of any team across the final 3 days. Yes, Antonelli was consistently in the mix on timing screens. But here's what the lap count doesn't tell you. Mercedes threw 2 engines in the trash during this test. 2. Different issues, different failures, same outcome. Destroyed power units before they'd even reached round 1 of the season. Day 2 of the first Bahrain test, engine change on the W17. Then on the final Friday of testing, Antonelli is on a hot lap. The car loses energy deployment and it rolls to a halt on track. He climbs out and walks back to the garage. The culprit? A loss of pneumatic pressure. Another power unit gone. Now Antonelli tried to put a brave face on it. That's why it's testing. The team already found the issue in the fix. Hopefully it'll be fine for Australia. But George Russell was less diplomatic. Russell said Mercedes have taken a step back since Barcelona in both regards. Performance, reliability, both. And he specifically flagged Red Bull. Our competitors have hit the ground running, especially Red Bull with the power unit. They look very strong. Think about what that means. Red Bull, who finished 2025 struggling, came into 2026 with a power unit that is reportedly thumping everyone on the straights, and their reliability has been rock solid throughout testing. Meanwhile, Mercedes, the preseason favorites, have been binning engines. The customer angle matters here too. McLaren, Williams, Alpine, they were all running the older Mercedes spec in Bahrain. The new upgraded power unit, that was exclusive to the works team. and it's the works team that's been having problems. So the upgrade that everyone is expecting to give Mercedes a decisive edge, that same upgrade is the one causing failures. If all of that wasn't enough, there's a third issue that could genuinely cost Mercedes points from lap 1 of the Australian Grand Prix. Race starts are broken, and I don't mean slightly off. George Russell himself said his practice starts were worse than my worst ever start in my entire F1 career. Think about that. A man who has been in Formula 1 for 6 years, who has driven some of the worst cars on the grid, says his starts in the 2026 Mercedes are the worst he has ever experienced. That is extraordinary. Here's why it's happening. With the MGU-H removed from power units this year, teams no longer have a device to keep the turbocharger spinning at idle. That means when a driver pulls up to the grid, the turbo is dead. They now have to manually spool it back up, a process that can take up to 10 seconds. And getting the energy deployment right at that exact moment of launch is right now almost impossible for Mercedes. Get it slightly wrong, and the rear wheels light up and the car snaps sideways. Antonelli confirmed starts are a weak point for the team. Ferrari, by contrast, appeared to have nailed it already. Ferrari's starts in Bahrain looked clinical. If that gap persists to Melbourne, and Melbourne, with its sharp first corner and aggressive first lap, that could mean Mercedes losing 2, 3, 4 places before they've even reached turn 1. Now, here's where I want to flip the script, because I think some nuance is needed. The long-run data from Bahrain, when analysts reconstructed Mercedes' race pace from their individual stints, because they never did a full 57-lap race simulation, produced a projected race time of 1 hour, 34 minutes and 2 seconds. Ferrari's best comparable run came in at 1 hour, 34 and 1. That's 1 second, over an hour and 34 minutes of racing. That is nothing. They are neck and neck with the fastest team on the long-run data. And crucially, Ferrari's long-run pace was run with a substantial fuel load in the car. McLaren's car is reportedly overweight. Red Bull were inconsistent and had significant tire deg issues in certain conditions. So the competitive picture, even with all of Mercedes' drama, is not as bleak as the headlines suggest. But here's the caveat that matters most. That performance assumes the engine can actually deliver it. If Mercedes has to turn the engine down to protect reliability, running the conservative customer map rather than the works specification, that 1 second gap to Ferrari could become 3 or 4. And in Formula 1, 3 or 4 seconds a race is the difference between fighting for the championship and fighting for the top 5. So where does this leave us? Mercedes are still the preseason favorites. Their underlying pace is real. Toto Wolff doesn't build teams that fall apart. But the combination of a fuel homologation crisis affecting 8 cars on the grid, 2 destroyed engines in a single test, and a race start procedure that their own drivers are describing as historically bad, that is a mountain of problems to solve in the 8 days between the end of testing and the lights going out in Melbourne. The question for Australia isn't whether Mercedes are fast. They are. The question is whether they can actually use that speed without the car falling apart underneath them. And if they can't, Ferrari, McLaren, and a resurgent Red Bull will be ready to take every single point that Mercedes leave on the table. The season starts in 8 days. I cannot wait.